Hey guys, so today I thought I'd cover one of the most frequent questions I get asked by people who are considering investing in property. A lot of people want to go out and jump into the house flipping business or buying houses to turn into rentals and that kind of a thing. And I have quite a bit of experience in that. I've been buying and selling real estate now for a little over 20 years. And most people have a fear of, oh my gosh, I'm going to buy a house and then find something majorly wrong with it and end up with a problem. So I thought I'd tell a story on myself about a house I bought that was pretty scary. So a little bit of backstory. Every week when I was buying real estate back in the 08, 09, 10 timeframe when the housing market crashed, and where I was living at the time, Western Washington, in the Tacoma Puyallup area, we would have more than 100 houses a week go into foreclosure. And so I was out looking at houses. We normally would go each Friday looking with 5 to 7 houses that would be on our list that fit our parameters. This particular week, we had one that was pretty wild, probably the worst project I ever did. And a buddy of mine was actually bidding on it. And so we left it off the list because we didn't want to compete with him. And long story short, he walked away, looked at a house. I had an opportunity to buy a different house that day and came back and asked me if I wanted to go ahead and buy it. And I took over bidding and we got this house. We bought it for $101,000. So in that particular market area, pretty decent price for a house. How do I put it? This house was, well, all my investor friends called it the dump house. We took 5 40-yard dumpsters of garbage out of the house the first week that we were there. We found a boat. We found a boat under garbage. We could not see the boat when we bought the house, but we found a 14-foot fiberglass boat on a trailer. That's how bad this place was. So none of that's a big problem. We'll show you some pictures. I'll put them up here so you can see what the house looked like. But the house itself was just full of junk. It was a flop house. It was probably a foot of garbage on the floor. And so we got all that stuff cleaned out. We started working our way through the house, fixing every single wall. I guess my son would have been probably 14 at the time, and I taught him how to repair drywall holes because every single wall in the entire house had a hole in it, at least one hole in it. So we began the process. We have water damage in the bathroom on the floor, and so we tore up the floor, made sure everything was fine. Turned out there was nothing going on. We had a little bit of a leaky toilet, replaced the flooring, and everything was great. Had the same problem in the living room. Water that was leaking from a closet space that had the water heater in the furnace, and it was running across the living room floor. And so we decided we better open up the floor and take a look there as well. Contractor said, nah, it'll be fine. It's no different than what was going on in the bathroom. But having done this a few times, I wasn't interested in having the inspector be the guy that pointed out that we had an issue underneath the floor. So we got the skill saw out and we cut a hole in the living room floor to find out what was going on underneath. And as you'll see in the photo that I'm going to show you right now, it was a pretty major problem. We had a joist that was completely rotted through, and we had one of the main beams supporting the house that was about a quarter of the way rotted through. Pretty major problem, right? Structural issue, what are you going to do? So sounds pretty crazy, sounds pretty scary, but really here's the bottom line. We took the time to figure out what it was going to take to repair it. Really all we needed to do was cut out the rotten areas, scab in a new piece of beam, make sure it was well supported. We poured new concrete piers, or additional concrete piers, I guess I should say. And it was kind of probably, as I look back, one of the cooler fixes that we did. We rolled a wheelbarrow into the living room and brought bags of concrete in, mixed concrete in the living room, threw a couple guys underneath the house through the hole that we'd cut in the floor, set up concrete forms, poured new piers or additional piers down below, set everything up so that we could put posts on top of those piers, support the beam, put it all back together. Probably took us, to get everything set up to do the project itself, probably took us a whopping 3 hours to go get the parts and pieces that we were going to need, the lumber and the concrete, and haul it back. Now, this house was 3 blocks from Home Depot, so that made it a little easier. But we went and took care of that, got it all put back together, and I'll show you some photos of the end result of the entire project. But the reality was, it was, if I remember correctly, I don't think we spent more than $300 on the parts and pieces that we needed to be able to repair it, and half a day of effort. And so slowed us down a little bit from the standpoint of working on the living room. We had a hole in the floor that we had to wait for the concrete to properly dry and cure before we put everything back together. But even in that scenario where we had a pretty major structural issue that popped up, it was fixable. Very few times, in fact never in the houses that I flipped in that window of time. We were flipping houses, my folks and I together were flipping houses for a couple of years, and we flipped 9 houses in about 24 months. And we had some issues here and there along the way, but nothing that was insurmountable. In fact, that house, I guess the only downside of that house is it took us a lot longer, only because I wasn't very experienced at flipping houses at the time. And so even though we made, from a dollar and cents perspective, we made a decent amount of money, the amount of time it took us to make the money made it not as profitable as it could have been. But we didn't lose our shorts. We made it through the deal, and we sold the house. We bought it for $101,000, and we sold it for $221,000. And I'll show you the pictures right here so you can kind of see just how great it was. Give you some before shots and some after shots here. So you can see this place really was the dump house. Here's shots of what the yard looked like prior to, and here's what the house looked like once we got it done. Amazing transformation. The couple that bought it, first-time home buyers, fell in love with the place and just loved it. So anyhow, don't be afraid to jump in and look into the possibility of flipping a house or buying something as a rental, even something that may look like it's in pretty rough shape. You need to make sure that you have enough margin when you're buying the property. And I guess that's probably the most important part of this conversation, is we bought that house knowing that we had $100,000, actually a little more than $100,000 worth of margin in it. So we dumped $57,000 into repairs, and so that left us with $60,000 left over for the balance of our expenses, financing expense, real estate expenses, all the other little parts and pieces. But as long as you've got enough margin, very rarely are you going to be getting yourself caught. So all that said, if you have questions about where do I start, what do I do, how do I find property, I have models that I use when I'm buying a house to flip it or buying a house to rent it that I'd be happy to share with you. Just give a call. You can reach us either by phone, 406-702-3949. You can call or text me on that number, or you can reach out to me by email at Shawn, S-H-A-W-N, Johnston @kw.com. All that information will be down below in the description. So look forward to talking to you. I hope that was helpful. Hope you won't be afraid to run out there and find an investment property. Have a great day.